Hello everyone, and welcome to the Ben 10 What Ifs. So we are back with an interesting movie on what if Ben 10 unleashed the Chrono Omnitrix and married Elena Validus. But before we start, I just want to remind you to please subscribe to my channel and hit the like button if you enjoy my content. Let's start the story. Chapter 1. Chrono Convergence. The NTUM stabilizer hummed with increasing intensity as Elena Validus adjusted the calibration settings. Blue light pulsed across her features, illuminating the thin scar that traced her right temple, a permanent reminder of the nanochip extraction procedure she'd undergone 4 years ago. The basement laboratory of Plumber headquarters had been her sanctuary for months now, the place where theoretical science met practical application. Third attempt at quantum entanglement stabilization commencing in 3, 2, 1. She pressed the activation switch. The device shuddered, emitting a high-pitched whine before sparks erupted from its core. Elena ducked as a panel blew off, sailing over her head to clatter against the reinforced wall. "Damn it," she muttered, straightening up and brushing a strand of black hair from her face. The stabilizer's core glowed an angry red before fading to dull gray. Another failure. The lab door slid open with a pneumatic hiss. "That didn't sound promising," said a familiar voice. Elena didn't turn around. After all these years, she still recognized Ben Tennyson's footsteps, confident but not heavy, purposeful without being aggressive. A rhythm she'd memorized long before she'd admit it mattered to her. "The quantum particles are refusing to maintain synchronized states across the dimensional membrane," she explained, disconnecting power cables from the smoking device. "I can establish entanglement, but it collapses the moment any information attempts to cross the boundary." Ben moved beside her, surveying the damaged equipment. At 26, he'd grown into his lanky teenage frame, standing just over 6 feet with shoulders broadened by years of combat training. The Omnitrix gleamed on his wrist, its design streamlined over the years through Azimuth's periodic updates. "English translation?" he asked, the corner of his mouth quirking upward. "I'm trying to create a communication system that works across different dimensions." Elena wiped her hands on a lab towel, finally turning to face him fully. "The regular quantum entanglement we use for instantaneous communication across space doesn't work when dimensional barriers are involved." Ben nodded, surprising her with his comprehension. "Because the quantum rules change between dimensions." "Exactly. The wave functions collapse differently." She raised an eyebrow. "You've been studying. I figured if I'm going to keep saving the universe, I should probably understand how it works." Ben shrugged, but there was quiet pride in his voice, not the boastful pride of his teenage years, but something more substantial. Elena remembered when Ben couldn't sit still for a 5-minute science briefing. Now he read quantum mechanics in his spare time. People changed. Some grew up. Some grew together. "So what brings the legendary Ben 10 to my humble lab?" she asked, shutting down the remaining systems with practiced efficiency. "I doubt it's my groundbreaking failures in trans-dimensional communication. Magister Tennyson wants us upstairs. Something about temporal anomalies appearing across 3 sectors." Ben's expression grew serious. "Rook's already prepping a ship." "Us," Elena repeated, arching an eyebrow. "Your expertise in quantum field manipulation makes you our best shot at understanding what's happening." Ben hesitated before adding, "And I requested you specifically." Heat crept up Elena's neck that had nothing to do with the overloaded circuitry. "Professional courtesy. Let's call it confidence in your abilities," Ben replied, his green eyes holding hers for a moment longer than strictly necessary. The air between them seemed to compress. 5 years of history, nanochip possession, recovery, cautious professional collaboration, and gradually rebuilding trust, condensing into a single moment of unspoken potential. The lab's emergency lighting chose that moment to kick in, bathing everything in pulsing amber. "We should go," Elena said, grabbing her specialized tablet and a compact case of equipment. "Temporal anomalies wait for no scientist." Ben smiled, a genuine expression that reached his eyes. "Some things never change. The Plumber Command Center buzzed with coordinated activity. Holographic displays showed star systems, planets, and spatial coordinates where anomalous readings had been detected. Magister Max Tennyson stood at the central console, his once brown hair now completely white but his posture as straight as ever. "Ah, There you are, he said as Ben and Elena entered. Rook's almost ready for departure. Rook Blanco approached, looking virtually unchanged from when Ben had first partnered with him nearly a decade ago. The Ravanagonder nodded in greeting, his expression serious. The anomalies appear to be growing in both frequency and intensity, he reported, bringing up a three-dimensional projection. Each instance lasts between 2.7 and 3.4 minutes before disappearing. However, residual temporal radiation remains detectable for approximately 47 hours afterward. Elena stepped forward, examining the data patterns. These energy signatures, they're consistent with theoretical models for Chronon particles. Chronon particles? Ben asked. The quantum carrier of temporal force, she explained, fingers flying across her tablet as she downloaded the relevant data. Similar to how photons carry electromagnetic force. They shouldn't exist in our dimension, they're purely theoretical. Max crossed his arms. Well, theory is becoming reality. We've recorded 17 anomalies in the past week. The latest 3 occurred simultaneously across different sectors. And you want us to investigate, Ben concluded. The primary anomaly is centered in Sector 7G, on the remains of Chronia. Ben stiffened. Chronia, that's been abandoned for centuries. Indeed, Rook confirmed. After the Chronians' failed attempt to control the fundamental flow of time, their civilization collapsed. The planet has been quarantined under Galactic Code 16b. Elena looked between them. I'm not familiar with Chronia. Before your time with the plumbers, Max explained. The Onians developed technology to manipulate localized time fields. They could accelerate, decelerate, or even temporarily pause time within limited areas. Their experiments eventually led to catastrophe. Temporal fractures that destroyed their civilization. We encountered some of their technology about 8 years ago, Ben added. Eon was trying to use it to rewrite history. Elena's eyes widened. And now similar temporal anomalies are appearing centered on their homeworld. That can't be coincidence, Ben said. Max nodded grimly, which is why I'm sending my best team to investigate. Ook has prepared the temporal shielded vessel, a specialized plumber ship designed to withstand chronological disturbances. With Dr. Validus's expertise in quantum physics, Ben's experience with Chronian technology, and my familiarity with the TSV's systems, we are optimally equipped for this mission, Rook concluded with characteristic precision. We should depart immediately, Elena said, Edie mentally cataloging the equipment she'd need. If these anomalies continue to increase in frequency, we could be looking at temporal instability spreading across multiple sectors. Ben checked the Omnitrix out of habit, ensuring it was fully charged. Anything else we should know before we head out, Grandpa? Max's expression grew more serious. Just be careful. Temporal distortions are unpredictable. They can affect perception, memory, even personal history. The TSV provides some protection, but it's not perfect. We will exercise maximum caution, Magister Tennyson, Rook assured him. That's not very reassuring coming from Ben's team, Elena quipped, earning a mock-offended look from Ben and the ghost of a smile from Max. We'll be back before you know it, Ben promised his grandfather. Maybe even before we left. Max shook his head. That's exactly the kind of temporal joke that tempts fate, Ben. The temporal shielded vessel resembled a sleeker version of the standard plumber ships, with iridescent panels layered throughout its hull. The interior featured an array of specialized temporal monitoring equipment surrounding the conventional control systems. Rook guided the ship smoothly out of Earth's atmosphere as Elena familiarized herself with the scientific apparatus. Ben occupied the co-pilot's seat, reviewing the mission parameters on the console display. The TSV will automatically establish a localized temporal field once we approach the anomalies, Rook explained. This should prevent any external time distortions from affecting us directly. However, the shields are not impenetrable. Meaning we could still experience some temporal effects, Elena concluded, calibrating her instruments. Precisely. Additionally, the shields cannot protect against deliberately targeted temporal technology, only natural or residual distortions. Ben leaned back in his seat, eyes on the stars stretching before them. So if someone's causing these anomalies deliberately, we could still be vulnerable. That is correct. Rook plotted the jump coordinates with methodical precision. We will reach the outer boundary of Sector 7G in approximately 27 minutes. I suggest you both prepare for potential chrono displacement. Elena activated her specialized equipment, an array of devices she had developed specifically for quantum field analysis. I've designed these sensors to detect and measure chronon particles. If we can pinpoint the source of the anomalies, we might be able to determine whether they're natural phenomena or artificially generated. Ben watched her work with quiet admiration. Elena had transformed her traumatic experience with the nanochips into specialized expertise. The neural interface the chips had established had given her unique insights into quantum field manipulation that she'd leveraged into groundbreaking research. You've come a long way from the Validus Laboratories days, he observed. Elena's hands paused momentarily. Sometimes I think the nanochips were a blessing in disguise. They rewired my neural pathways in ways that let me perceive quantum interactions more intuitively than most humans. You turned a curse into a strength. Ben said softly. That takes real courage. Their eyes met briefly before Elena returned her attention to her equipment, but not before Ben caught the slight flush on her cheeks. We're approaching the jump point, Rook announced, interrupting the moment. Engaging hyperdrive in 3, 2, 1. The stars outside the viewport stretched into luminous streaks as the ship accelerated beyond conventional physics. The familiar pressure of faster-than-light travel pressed them back into their seats momentarily before the ship's compensators adjusted. Jump successful, Rook reported after a few moments. We will reach Chronia's orbit in 17 minutes. The peaceful rhythm of space travel was shattered by a sudden alarm. Red warning lights Florida shed across the control panel as the ship shuddered violently. What's happening? Ben demanded, already checking the defensive systems. Rook's fingers flew over the controls. We are encountering a temporal disturbance, much larger than any previously recorded. Elena's instruments spiked dramatically. Chronon density is off the charts. This isn't just an anomaly, it's a full temporal wave. The viewscreen displayed the space ahead of them, where reality itself seemed to ripple and distort. Colors shifted across the spectrum as stars appeared to age and rejuvenate in rapid succession. Can we go around it? Ben asked, bracing himself against the console as the ship trembled. Negative, Rook replied. The distortion is expanding too rapidly. At our current velocity, we will intersect with it in approximately 40 seconds. Activate the temporal shields at maximum, Ben ordered. Rook engaged the specialized systems. The iridescent panels throughout the ship began to glow with increasing intensity, creating a visible field around the vessel. Shields at maximum, he confirmed. However, I cannot guarantee they will withstand a distortion of this magnitude. Elena studied her readings with growing concern. This isn't random. The wave patterns show signs of deliberate modulation. This was artificially generated. Ben's expression hardened. Can we send a warning back to Plumber HQ? Communications are already being affected by the temporal interference, Rook reported. I cannot establish a stable connection. The distortion loomed larger in the viewscreen, a churning maelstrom of twisted spacetime. Impact in 20 seconds, Rook announced, his voice steady despite the danger. Ben made a split-second decision. Rook, transfer all non-essential power to the shields. Elena, see if you can use your equipment to create a quantum field that might help stabilize our temporal positioning. Both moved immediately to comply, recognizing the authority in his voice, not demanded but earned through years of leadership in crisis situations. Quantum field generator active, Elena called out moments later, creating an entangled particle shell around the existing shields. Power redirected, Rook confirmed. Shields at 127% of recommended maximum. Ben checked the Omnitrix, mentally cataloging which aliens might help if the shields failed. Clockwork C. Old potentially create a localized time field, but against a distortion of this magnitude. 5 seconds to impact, Rook counted down. 4, 3, 2. Brace yourselves. Ben shouted as the ship plunged into the temporal wave. Reality fractured around them. The viewscreen displayed impossible colors as the laws of physics bent and warped. Inside the ship, gravity fluctuated wildly. Equipment detached from bulkheads, hovering momentarily before crashing back down as gravitational forces reasserted themselves. Ben felt his consciousness stretching, memories from different points in his timeline overlapping and blurring. He saw himself at 10, discovering the Omnitrix for the first time, at 16, facing a Gregor, at 20, standing with Rook against the Increasing Invisio. All simultaneously present in his mind. Through the disorientation, he glimpsed Elena struggling to maintain her position at the science station, her face contorted with effort as she fought to hold on to her own timeline. Rook remained rigidly focused on the controls, though blue sparks of temporal energy danced across his fur. The ship's alarms reached a deafening crescendo before abruptly silencing. For one heart-stopping moment, everything, sound, motion, even thought itself, seemed to pause. Then reality crashed back with jarring force. The ship tumbled end over end, emergency stabilizers fighting to regain control. Lights flickered as systems rebooted. Gravity normalized with a suddenness that slammed floating objects back to the deck. Status report, Ben called out, pulling himself back into his seat. Rook's fingers danced across the partially functioning controls. Main power at 47%. Temporal shields offline. Navigation systems rebooting. The quantum field collapsed, Elena reported, wiping blood from a small cut on her forehead. But it appears to have absorbed enough of the temporal energy to prevent complete shield failure. The view screen cleared enough to show their surroundings. The stars had returned to normal, but the configuration was unfamiliar. Where are we? Ben asked. Rook consulted the recovering navigation system. We appear to be still in Sector 7G, but something is wrong with the stellar cartography. Define wrong, Elena prompted, already checking her instruments. According to our charts, we should be seeing the Caledarian Nebula from this position. But it is not there. Rook's brow furrowed in confusion. And several star systems are present that do not appear in our database. Ben felt a chill run down his spine. Are you saying we've been displaced in time? Quote, that would be the logical conclusion, Rook confirmed. Though whether we have traveled to the past or future is unclear. Elena's expression grew more troubled as she examined her readings. It's worse than that. The quantum signatures surrounding us don't match our original universe's baseline. Meaning, Ben prompted. We haven't just moved through time, Elena explained, looking up with concern etched across her features. We've crossed into a parallel timeline, a different dimensional reality. Silence fell as the implications sank in. Ben was the first to break it. Can we get back? Elena hesitated. Theoretically, yes. If we can locate another temporal distortion with the right quantum signature, we might be able to use it to return to our timeline. But first, we need to figure out exactly where, and when, we are. Chronia, Ben decided. If the anomalies were centered there in our timeline, it might be the same here. It's our best starting point. Rook nodded in agreement. The ship's systems are gradually recovering. We should have sufficient power for short-range travel within 15 minutes. Good. Set course as soon as we're able. Ben turned to Elena. In the meantime, see if you can determine any significant differences between this timeline and ours. The more we know about where we are, the better our chances of getting home. Elena nodded, already absorbed in her analysis. Ben moved to help Rook with the ship's repairs, but his mind raced with possibilities and dangers. Timeline displacement was Serious. They could encounter alternate versions of themselves, or discover a reality where key events had unfolded differently. As he worked, Ben glanced occasionally at Elena. The determination in her expression as she focused on the problem at hand reminded him why he'd specifically requested her for this mission. Not just for her scientific expertise, but for her resilience. If anyone could help navigate a crisis of quantum mechanics and temporal displacement, it was Elena Validus. An hour later, the TSV approached Chronia's orbit with systems restored to approximately 70% functionality. Planet below bore little resemblance to the abandoned world Ben remembered. Instead of a dead, quarantined sphere, Chronian civilization appeared to be thriving. Gleaming cities dotted the surface, connected by transportation networks that pulsed with energy. Orbital platforms surrounded the planet, their designs unlike anything from Ben's timeline. This confirms our displacement, Rook observed. In our reality, Chronian civilization collapsed approximately 1,200 years ago. Elena studied the sensor readings with growing fascination. The quantum signature of this timeline diverged from ours roughly 2 millennia ago. Something happened at that point to create this alternate reality. Are we detecting any temporal anomalies? Ben asked, studying the vibrant planet below. Yes, Elena confirmed, adjusting her instruments. Multiple small distortions across the surface, and one significant concentration in what appears to be the capital city. That's our target then, Ben decided. Rook, can you get us down there without attracting attention? That may prove challenging, Rook replied. The Chronian defense grid is substantially more advanced than any technology we have encountered. They have already directed several scanning beams toward our vessel. As if on cue, the communication system activated, displaying an image of a humanoid figure with distinctly golden skin and symmetrical facial markings. When the being spoke, the ship's translators converted the words into English with only a slight delay. Unidentified vessel, you have entered restricted Chronian space. State your identity and purpose immediately. Ben stepped forward. I'm Ben Tennyson of Earth. We're peaceful travelers who were caught in a temporal distortion. We mean no harm and seek assistance. The Chronian's expression remained impassive as they studied Ben. After a moment, they responded, our sensors detect unusual temporal radiation emanating from your vessel, as well as a device of significant power on your wrist. Their eyes narrowed slightly. You will be escorted to landing platform ALPHA-7 for inspection and verification. The transmission ended before Ben could respond. Moments later, two sleek Chronian vessels appeared alongside them, their designs emphasizing smooth curves and translucent components. Should we comply? Rook asked, his hand hovering over the weapon's controls. Ben considered their options. Fighting their way through would be difficult with systems still recovering, and would certainly make them enemies in this timeline. Compliance offered the opportunity to gather information and potentially access Chronian temporal technology. We'll follow their escort, he decided. But stay alert. If things go south, we need to be ready to leave quickly. Elena moved closer, lowering her voice. Ben, there's something you should know before we land. The seriousness in her tone caught his attention. What is it? I've been analyzing the quantum signatures of all three of us since we arrived, she explained. Our presence here is creating increasing temporal friction. Meaning, this timeline already has its own versions of us, somewhere. The longer we stay, the more unstable the local spacetime becomes around us. Elena glanced at her readings. It's like the timeline itself recognizes we don't belong and is trying to correct the paradox. Ben frowned. How long do we have? Hard to say exactly. Days, maybe a week at most before the effect becomes dangerous. Then we'd better make this visit count, Ben said grimly. Rook, take us in. The TSV followed the Chronian escorts through the atmosphere. As they descended, the true scale of Chronian advancement became apparent. Buildings spiraled impossibly upward, their structures seeming to bend space itself. Transportation systems operated without visible supports, vehicles flowing through translucent tubes that shifted positions according to traffic patterns. The entire city pulsed with golden-hued energy that flowed through channeled pathways. Their civilization is built around temporal manipulation, Elena observed in awe. They're not just using it for specific applications, they've integrated it into their entire infrastructure. The ship landed on the designated platform where a delegation of Chronians awaited them. Through the viewscreen, Ben could see they were surrounded by what appeared to be security forces, though their weapons were not overtly displayed. Rook, stay with the ship and be ready for emergency departure if necessary, Ben instructed. Elena, you're with me. Your scientific knowledge will be valuable in understanding their technology. And the Omnitrix? Elena asked quietly. Ben glanced at the device on his wrist. It's always drawn attention, no matter what timeline we're in. Better to be upfront about it than have them discover it later and think we were hiding something. With that decision made, Ben and Elena exited the ship to face the Chronian delegation. The moment they stepped onto the platform, Ben felt a subtle shift. Gravity seemed slightly lighter, and sounds reached his ears with a millisecond delay. As though time itself flowed differently here. The lead Chronian stepped forward, taller than the others with more elaborate facial markings. I am Temporal Adjudicator Zoran. You claim to be Trav. Ellers displaced by a temporal distortion. Ben nodded. That's correct. We're from an alternate timeline where Chronian civilization took a different path. Zoran's eyes narrowed slightly at this diplomatic phrasing. Our sensors detect quantum displacement consistent with your claim. However, the device on your wrist registers as potentially dangerous temporal technology. It's called the Omnitrix, Ben explained. It allows me to transform into different alien species, but it's not primarily a temporal device. Yet it contains chronon particles, Zoran observed. A curious feature for a transformation tool. Elena stepped forward. If I may, adjudicator, we experienced a major temporal wave that may have affected the Omnitrix. We're trying to understand these anomalies and find our way back to our timeline. Zoran studied them both carefully before responding. The Council of Chronos has noted increasing temporal disturbances throughout this sector. Your arrival may be connected to these events. After a moment's consideration, he continued, you will be granted temporary visitor status while we verify your story. However, you must agree to full quantum scanning and monitoring during your stay. That's acceptable, Ben agreed, recognizing both the necessity of cooperation and the potential to learn more about the anomalies. Very well. Follow me to the temporal verification chamber. Zoran turned, gesturing for them to accompany him. As they walked through the Chronian city, Ben and Elena struggled not to stare at the technological marvels surrounding them. Chronians moved through their daily activities in what appeared to be locally manipulated time fields, some moving at accelerated rates, others in slowed time bubbles that allowed for precise work or extended recreation. Their control over temporal mechanics is incredible, Elena whispered. They're manipulating entropy at a local level while maintaining overall universal consistency. In our timeline, this level of manipulation caused catastrophic failure, Ben reminded her quietly. I wonder what they did differently here. They arrived at a towering structure that seemed to exist partially outside normal space. Its upper levels shimmering with chronon energy. Inside, they were led to a chamber lined with instruments far more advanced than anything Elena had designed. Please stand in the central platform. Zoran instructed. The scanning process is harmless but may cause temporary sensory disorientation. Ben and Elena stepped onto the indicated platform, automatically moving closer together as the unknown technology activated around them. Golden energy fields enveloped them as multiple scanning beams passed through their bodies. The sensation was unlike anything Ben had experienced before, as though his consciousness was being gently stretched across multiple moments simultaneously. He caught fragmentary glimpses of other possibilities, himself at different ages, in different circumstances, making different choices. For a brief moment, he saw himself standing beside Elena in formal attire, both looking older and happier, surrounded by friends and family in what appeared to be a celebration. The vision vanished as quickly as it had appeared. The scanning fields retracted, leaving Ben slightly disoriented. Beside him, Elena swayed momentarily, and he instinctively reached out to steady her. The scan is complete, Zoran announced, studying the results with evident surprise. You were indeed telling the truth about your dimensional displacement. His gaze fixed on Ben with increased intensity. However, the device on your wrist contains temporal components that should not exist in any timeline we are aware of. Ben frowned. What do you mean? Your Omnitrix contains chronon particles with a quantum signature that matches neither your timeline nor ours. Zoran's expression became more severe. It appears to contain temporal energy from a third reality, one that should not exist at all. Quote, Elena stepped forward, scientific curiosity overcoming her disorientation. May I see the scan results? I might be able to help interpret them. After a moment's hesitation, Zoran authorized her access to a nearby console. Elena studied the data, her expression growing increasingly troubled. This can't be right, she murmured. According to these readings, the chronon particles in the Omnitrix are from a timeline that was erased. Precisely, Zoran confirmed. We call such quantum signatures ghost patterns, remnants of possibilities that were eliminated from the multiverse. Ben looked down at the Omnitrix with new concern. How could it contain energy from an erased timeline? Before Zoran could answer, another Chronian entered the chamber hurriedly. Adjudicator, we have detected a major temporal distortion forming in the central nexus. The pattern matches the anomalies we've been tracking. Zoran's demeanor shifted immediately from suspicious to alarmed. Secure the visitors and prepare the stability generators. Wait, Ben interjected. We came here to investigate these anomalies. Let us help. This is not your concern, Zoran replied dismissively. With respect, adjudicator, Elena countered, the same anomalies exist in our timeline. And according to your own scans, Ben's Omnitrix contains relevant temporal energy. We might provide insights your people don't have. Zoran hesitated, clearly weighing the potential benefits against the risks of involving dimensional outsiders. The decision was made for him when alarms began blaring throughout the facility. Temporal breach in progress. Announced an automated system. Nexus integrity compromised. Evacuation protocols initiated. What's happening? Ben demanded. Something is attempting to force its way through the dimensional barrier, Zoran explained tersely. If it succeeds, the damage to our timeline could be catastrophic. Take us there, Ben insisted. Now. After a moment's consideration, Zoran nodded sharply. Follow me, quickly. They hurried through corridors filled with Chronians moving with practiced efficiency despite the obvious crisis. The central nexus proved to be a massive chamber at the heart of the building, dominated by a spherical apparatus surrounded by control stations. The sphere pulsed with unstable energy, fract. Ures of golden light spreading across its surface. The nexus maintains temporal stability for our entire civilization, Zoran explained as technicians worked frantically at the controls. Something is attempting to use it as a conduit between dimensions. Elena immediately moved to an unoccupied console, quickly assessing the data. The quantum signature, it's the same as the Chronon particles in the Omnitrix. Ben felt the device on his wrist grow warm, as though responding to the energy in the room. The display glowed with unusual patterns he'd never seen before. Whatever's coming Ruff is connected to the Omnitrix somehow, he realized aloud. The fractures in the Nexus sphere widened, golden light spilling out with increasing intensity. Chronians abandoned their stations as He energy became too dangerous to approach. We must seal the chamber and initiate quantum purge, Zoran ordered, already moving toward the exit. No. Ben stepped forward, his decision made in an instant. Get everyone out. I'll handle this. Ben, what are you doing? Elena's voice was sharp with concern. Trust me, he replied, his eyes not leaving the fracturing nexus. If this is connected to the Omnitrix, then I'm the best chance we have. Elena clearly wanted to argue but recognized the determination in his stance. Be careful, she said instead, helping to usher the remaining Chronians toward the exit. As the chamber emptied, Ben approached the nexus. The Omnitrix pulsed in time with the fracturing sphere, the connection between them undeniable. Okay, whatever you are, Ben muttered. Let's see what you want with me. He raised the Omnitrix toward the nexus. The device responded instantly, its faceplate sliding back to reveal a completely new interface, a crystalline display swirling with temporal energy. Ben had seen many versions of the Omnitrix over the years, but this was entirely different, as though the device was evolving in real time. A beam of golden light shot from the nexus. Connecting with the Omnitrix, pain lanced up Ben's arm as information and energy transferred between the two objects. Visions flooded his mind. Fragments of timelines, possibilities that had been and might yet be. Choices made and unmade across countless realities. Through the overwhelming sensory input, Ben glimpsed a shadowy figure moving within the Nexus sphere itself, emptying to push through the dimensional barrier. Not human, not alien in any conventional sense, but a being composed of temporal energy, a living embodiment of time itself. Who are you? Ben managed to ask, his voice strained with effort. The figure became more distinct, its form stabilizing enough to reveal a humanoid shape with features that shifted constantly between different possibilities of itself. I am what remains, came the response, not spoken but impressed directly into Ben's consciousness. The last echo of a timeline that should not have been erased. Asterisk. What do you want? To exist. To prevent what comes. The figure stretched a hand toward Ben. The Chronians of your timeline failed because they did not understand the true nature of time. These Chronians will fail as well, but differently. All timelines are threatened. Asterisk. Threatened by what? The Chronivore. The devourer of possibilities. It has already consumed my timeline and countless others. Now it hungers for yours. Asterisk. The connection between the Omnitrix and the Nexus intensified. Ben felt the device changing, reconfiguring itself at a fundamental level. Your Omnitrix was created by Azimuth to preserve the DNA of all species. Now it must evolve to preserve the timestreams of all realities. Asterisk. I don't understand, Ben gritted out, struggling to maintain consciousness as the energy coursed through him. You will. The figure began to dissolve, its energy flowing into the Omnitrix. The Chrono Omnitrix will give you the power to move between timelines, to transform not just your body but time itself around you. Use it wisely. Ben Tennyson. The fate of all possibilities rests with you. Asterisk. With those final words, the figure disappeared completely. The golden light retracted into the Omnitrix, which now glowed with new patterns and configurations. The Nexus sphere stabilized, the fractures sealing themselves as the dimensional breach closed. Ben staggered backward, nearly falling as the connection broke. The Omnitrix on his wrist had transformed completely, still recognizably the device Azimuth had created, but evolved. The traditional green had been joined by flowing patterns of gold that shifted and moved like liquid time across its surface. The chamber doors slid open as Elena and Zoran cautiously returned. They found Ben standing alone, staring at the transformed device on his wrist. Ben. Elena rushed to his side, concern evident in her voice. What happened? Are you all right? I'm not sure, he admitted, still trying to process the experience. Something came through. Not physically, more like a consciousness. It transformed the Omnitrix. Zoran approached cautiously, scanning instruments directed at the device. Impossible, he whispered after reading the results. Chronon concentration should be fatal to any biological organism. What does that mean? Elena asked sharply. It means, Zoran replied, not taking his eyes off the transformed Omnitrix, that why our friend now wears the most powerful temporal device ever created. What you call the Omnitrix has evolved into something our legends speak of but we believed impossible to create, a device capable of manipulating the very fabric of time itself. Ben looked down at the device, feeling its new power humming through his body. It called itself the Chrono Omnitrix, he said quietly. And it warned M.E. about something called the Chronivore, a being that devours timelines. Elena's scientific skepticism warred visibly with the evidence before her eyes. If that's true, it could explain the temporal anomalies we detected. Not natural phenomena, but damage caused by this chronivore entity. Our temporal historians speak of such a being in our oldest texts, Zoran confirmed, his earlier suspicion replaced by something approaching reverence. A cosmic entity that exists outside conventional time streams, feeding on possibilities to increase its power. The entity that contacted me said it was from a timeline that had already been consumed, Ben explained. It somehow preserved its consciousness long enough to, I guess you could say it uploaded itself into the Omnitrix, transforming it. Zoran studied Ben with newfound intensity. If the legends are true, the chronivore cannot be destroyed by conventional means. It exists simultaneously across all potential timelines. Then we'll find unconventional means. Ben replied with quiet determination, starting with figuring out exactly what this upgraded Omnitrix can do. As if responding to his words, the Chrono Omnitrix's display activated, projecting a holographic interface unlike anything Ben had seen before. Instead of showing alien transformations, it displayed what appeared to be a map of intersecting timelines, a multi-dimensional representation of reality itself. Remarkable, Elena breathed, her scientific fascination temporarily overriding her concern. It's mapping the quantum relationships between different probability streams. Ben studied the projection, noticing a dark area spreading across multiple timeline branches. As that, the chronovore's activity, Zoran confirmed grimly. According to this, it has already consumed 17 distinct timeline possibilities in this sector alone. And it's approaching the convergence point that connects to our home timeline, Elena added, pointing to a critical junction in the holographic map. Ben's expression hardened with resolve. Then we need to get back and warn our people. If this thing is as dangerous as it seems, we'll need all the help we can get. There is a way, Zoran said after a moment's consideration. Our scientists have been studying the temporal distortions. We believe we could use the Nexus to generate a controlled pathway back to your timeline. That sounds dangerously similar to what caused your civilization's downfall in our reality, Elena pointed out. Zoran nodded solemnly. Indeed, the risk is significant. If the chronivore truly threatens all timelines, then cooperation between our realities may be our only hope. How quickly can your people prepare this pathway? Ben asked. Several hours at minimum. The calculations must be precise, or we risk creating more damage than we prevent. Ben turned to Elena. We should update Rook and prepare the ship. If we're opening a pathway between dimensions, I want to be ready to move immediately. I'll authorize your return to your vessel, Zoran agreed. Our scientists will contact you when the preparations are complete. As they left the Nexus chamber, Elena moved closer to Ben. Speaking quietly, are you sure you're all right? The amount of Chronon energy you were exposed to. I feel different, Ben admitted. Like I can sense time in a way I couldn't before. But physically, I'm fine. Elena didn't look entirely convinced. When we get back to the ship, I want to run some tests. If the Chrono Omnitrix is altering your biology to accommodate temporal manipulation, we need to understand the effects. Ben nodded his agreement, his attention partially focused on the device itself. The Chrono Omnitrix felt alive in a way the standard version never had, not sentient exactly, but aware, as though it existed partially outside normal time and could perceive possibilities that Ben himself couldn't yet comprehend. As they reached the exit of the building, a sudden tremor shook the structure. Warning alerts activated throughout the city. Another temporal distortion, a Chronian technician called out. Massive scale, approaching rapidly. Ben and Elena exchanged alarmed glances. Without hesitation, they broke into a run, heading for the landing platform where the TSV waited. Rook, Ben called through his communicator. Start the engines. We may need to make an emergency departure. Understood, came the calm reply. However, I should inform you that our sensors are detecting a temporal anomaly approaching our position. It appears significantly larger than the one we encountered previously. It's the Chronovore, Ben realized with growing dread. It must have followed the temporal signature when the Nexus was breached. They reached the landing platform to find chaos erupting across the Chronian city. The sky above had taken on an unnatural hue, reality itself seeming to warp and distort as the temporal distortion approached. The TSV's hatch opened as they arrived, Rook standing ready to receive them. The ship's systems are at 82% functionality, he reported as they boarded. However, I cannot guarantee. Our temporal shields will withstand another displacement event of this magnitude. We may not need them, Ben replied, looking down at the Chrono Omnitrix. This thing was created to counter the Chronovore. It might be able to protect us. Elena moved immediately to her monitoring equipment, activating sensors to track the approaching distortion. It's moving directly toward the Nexus, she reported. The pattern is definitely artificial. This is a deliberate attack. Through the view screen, they watched as Chronian defense systems activated, projecting golden energy fields around critical infrastructure. Zoran's voice came through on the communication system. Ben Tennyson, our scientists have detected your ship preparing for departure. I strongly advise against this course of action. The temporal distortion will destroy any vessel attempting to pass through it. We're not leaving, Ben assured him. But we need to be mobile. The Chrono Omnitrix might be able to counter this thing. But I'll need to get close to the distortion. There was a brief pause before Zoran responded, very well. Our defense systems will attempt to create a safe corridor for your approach. But RNED, no technology in our history has successfully repelled the Chronovore once it begins feeding. Then we'll make history, Ben replied with grim determination. Rook, take us up. Elena, keep tracking that distortion. I need to know exactly where to intercept it. The TSV lifted off, navigating through the increasingly chaotic airspace above the Chronian capital. Other vessels fled in the opposite direction as energy discharges rippled across the sky. The distortion is concentrating above the central nexus, Elena reported. It appears to be opening, for lack of a better term. Creating a breach between dimensions. That's our target, Ben decided. Rook, get us as close as you safely can. As the ship approached, the true scale of the threat became apparent. A massive vortex had formed in the sky, its edges composed of fragmented reality itself. Within the swirling maelstrom, a darker presence was taking shape, an entity of impossible proportions, existing partially in their dimension and partially beyond it. The Chronovore, Ben whispered, recognizing it instinctively. The Chrono Omnitrix pulsed with increasing intensity as they drew nearer, responding to the presence of its antithesis. Ben felt knowledge flowing into his mind, not consciously provided, but accessible as though he'd always known it. I need to get outside, he announced suddenly, moving toward the airlock. Outside, Elena repeated incredulously. Ben, that's suicide. The temporal distortion alone would tear you apart. The Chrono Omnitrix will protect me, Ben replied with certainty he couldn't explain. It's the only way to drive the chronovore back before it consumes this timeline. Elena looked ready to argue further, but something in Ben's expression stopped her. Instead, she grabbed a small device from her equipment array and pressed it into his hand. Quantum tether, she explained quickly. It'll maintain your connection to our timeline's quantum signature. Whatever happens out there, it should help you find your way back to us. The gesture and the concern behind it touched Ben deeply. I'll be back, he promised. You'd better be, she replied, her voice softening momentarily. We still have too much unfinished business. The moment hung between them, filled with things unsaid but mutually understood. Then Ben turned toward the airlock, his expression set with determination. Approaching optimal interception position, Rook announced. Temporal distortion at maximum observable intensity. Open the airlock on my mark, Ben instructed, positioning himself in the small chamber. He raised his wrist, studying the Chrono Omnitrix with newfound understanding. The device had transformed not just in appearance but in fundamental function. The familiar mechanism for alien transformation remained, but it had been integrated into a much more complex system designed to manipulate temporal energy. Ben rotated the dial, no longer cycling through alien foe RMS but through what appeared to be different temporal modes. He selected one that seemed to indicate a protective field and activated the device. Mark, he called out. The outer door slid open, exposing him to the chaotic maelstrom outside. Wind howled through the airlock, but instead of being pulled out into the void, Ben found himself surrounded by a golden energy field generated by the Chrono Omnitrix. The field expanded around him, creating a bubble of stable spacetime that protected him from the temporal distortion. With a deep breath, Ben stepped out of the ship and into the open air. Instead of falling, he found himself suspended within the protective field, able to move through the distorted space by thought alone. Below, the Chronian city struggled against the effects of the temporal breach. Buildings phased in and out of different states as time fluctuated around them. Above, the chronovore continued to take form, a vast shadowy presence that seemed to absorb light and time itself. Ben directed his protective bubble upward, moving directly toward the entity. As he approached, he could feel the Chrono Omnitrix drawing power from the very distortion the chronovore had created. Turning its energy against it. You cannot stop what has already begun, came a voice in Ben's mind, cold and ancient beyond comprehension. All timelines will be consumed. All possibilities will feed my existence. Not while I'm here, Ben replied, raising the Chrono Omnitrix toward the entity. Not while there's still someone to protect those possibilities. The device on his wrist pulsed with blinding intensity, projecting a beam of concentrated temporal energy directly into the heart of the chronovore's partially formed manifestation. The entity recoiled, its presence in this dimension weakening momentarily. The ghost consciousness has given you a weapon, the chronovore acknowledged, its mental voice tinged with surprise. But it is incomplete. You do not yet understand its true power or purpose. I understand enough, Ben countered, maintaining the energy beam. I understand that you threaten everything and everyone I care about across all timelines. That's all I need to know. He poured his will into the Chrono Omnitrix, instinctively accessing deeper functions that pushed back against the chronovore's presence. Golden light expanded outward, forcing the temporal breach to begin closing. The chronovore's form distorted as its connection to this dimension weakened. This is merely one battle in an endless war, Ben Tennyson. I have consumed countless timelines before yours. And will consume countless more. You cannot be everywhere at once. Watch me, Ben gritted out, pushing harder. The Chrono Omnitrix responded to his determination, drawing more power from the surrounding temporal energy. With a final surge of golden light, the breach collapsed in on itself. The chronovore's presence was forced back into whatever dimensional space it occupied between timelines. Its final thought echoed in Ben's mind as it retreated. I will find you again, Time Walker. In another place, another possibility. And when your vigilance falters, I will feast. The distortion vanished abruptly, leaving normal space in its wake. Without the temporal energies to sustain it, Ben's protective bubble began to dissipate. He found himself suddenly subject to gravity once more, plummeting toward the Chronian city below. Before panic could set in, the TSV swooped beneath him, airlock open and ready. Ben landed roughly inside the ship as Rook closed the outer door and pressurized the chamber. Ben. Elena was waiting as the inner door opened, immediately helping him to his feet. "Are you all right? The readings we got were off the charts." "I'm okay," he assured her, though exhaustion was setting in rapidly. "The chronovore is gone, for now. Your vital signs are significantly elevated," Rook observed, scanner in hand. "And the Chrono Omnitrix app appears to be in some form of recharge state." Ben glanced down at the device, noting that the golden patterns had dimmed considerably. "It used a lot of power to close the breach. I think it needs time to recover." "As do you," Elena insisted, guiding him to a seat. "That was either the bravest or most foolish thing I've ever seen you do, and I've seen you do a lot of both." "Did it work?" Ben asked, looking toward the view screen. The view showed Chronian ships moving to assist damaged structures, but the city itself appeared largely intact. The unnatural distortions had vanished from the sky, replaced by normal atmospheric conditions. "It appears you successfully repelled the entity," Rook confirmed. "Chronian authorities are hailing us with gratitude and requests for your condition status." "Tell them I'm fine," Ben replied, though the bone-deep weariness suggested otherwise. "And ask about their timeline generation plan. We need to get back to our reality as soon as possible." "Already done," Elena reported. "Zoran says they can have the pathway ready within 2 hours. They're prioritizing it after what just happened." Ben nodded, leaning back in his seat. The encounter with the chronovore had left him with more questions than answers, but one thing was certain: the threat extended beyond this timeline to their own. They needed to return home and prepare for whatever came next. Elena sat beside him, her expression thoughtful. "The entity spoke to you, didn't it? I could see it in your face when you were out there." "Yes," Ben confirmed. "It called me, Time Walker, and said this was just one battle in a larger war. It's consumed other timelines before and plans to consume more, including ours." "Then the Chrono Omnitrix truly was created to fight it," Elena reasoned. "The consciousness that transferred into your original Omnitrix must have been preparing for this confrontation. Which means we have to learn everything we can about how it works," Ben said, looking down at the slowly recharging device. "Before the chronovore finds us again." The implications hung heavy in the air. The mission that had begun as an investigation into temporal anomalies had become something far more significant, a battle for the very existence of their timeline and countless others. As the TSV maintained its position above the recovering Chronian city, Ben found himself contemplating possibilities he'd never considered before. The multiverse was vaster and more vulnerable than he'd imagined, and now he carried the responsibility of protecting it in an entirely new way. His gaze met Elena's, and he saw his own determination reflected in her eyes. Whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them together, across timelines, dimensions, and whatever else the universe had in store. Chapter 1 End Chapter 2, Temporal Fractures. Night descended over Bellwood, wrapping the city in a blanket of uncharacteristic silence. 3 days had passed since their return from the alternate Chronian timeline. Though Ben Tennyson couldn't quite shake the feeling that parts of him remained scattered across dimensions. He stood on the rooftop of Plumber headquarters, gazing at stars whose light had traveled billions of years to reach his eyes. The concept of time had never felt so tangible, so fragile. The Chrono Omnitrix pulsed gently on his wrist, its golden green glow casting strange shadows across his features. Since their return, the device had settled into a rhythm of its own, sometimes dormant, sometimes humming with barely contained energy. Azimuth had been contacted immediately, but the Galvan genius remained frustratingly unreachable, reportedly deep in meditation on Primus. "Thought I'd find you up here." Elena's voice cut through his contemplation as she emerged from the rooftop access door. "Max said you missed the debriefing." "Sorry," Ben replied without turning. "I needed some air." Elena moved beside him, her lab coat exchanged for casual attire, dark jeans and a midnight blue sweater that caught the starlight. She followed his gaze skyward, silent for several moments before speaking again. The quantum diagnostics came back, she said finally. Your cellular structure is showing unprecedented chronon saturation. Ben nodded slightly. Is that why I keep seeing things? Moments that haven't happened yet, or maybe never will. Precognitive flashes. Elena's scientific interest visibly sharpened. You didn't mention those before. They started this morning. Ben looked down at the transformed Omnitrix. Small things at first. I knew you'd spill coffee on those readouts before it happened. I caught Bluecock before he fell off that ladder, before he even stumbled. And they're getting stronger, more frequent, more vivid. He turned to face her fully. An hour ago, I saw you coming through that door, wearing exactly what you're wearing now, saying exactly what you just said. Elena's expression shifted from scientific curiosity to genuine concern. This confirms my theory. The Chrono Omnitrix isn't just attached to you anymore, Ben. It's integrating with your biology at a quantum level. Meaning the distinction between you and it is blurring. She gestured toward the device. The chronon particles are establishing residence in your cellular structure. You're becoming chronologically fluid. Ben absorbed this with remarkable calmness. After 15 years of transformation, evolution, and adaptation, his tolerance for the extraordinary had become nearly limitless. Will it kill me? The bluntness of his question caught Elena off guard. I don't think so. Your body appears to be adapting. It's more like you're evolving to accommodate new perceptual dimensions. Like how chromastone can perceive radiation spectrums invisible to humans. Similar principle, but more fundamental. You're beginning to perceive time itself as a dimension you can potentially navigate. Elena's scientific detachment faltered momentarily. I'm worried about the psychological impact. Human minds aren't designed to process temporal perception beyond our linear experience. Ben smiled faintly. Who says I'm still entirely human? The question hung between them, neither rhetorical nor entirely serious. After years of alien transformations, had something fundamentally changed in Ben's humanity? Thought had occasionally troubled him during quiet moments like this. Elena reached out, her fingertips brushing his hand in an uncharacteristic gesture of reassurance. Human enough where it counts. Their eyes met briefly in shared understanding, both remembering Elena's own journey back from the edge of humanity during her nanochip possession. If anyone understood the blurred boundaries between human and other, it was Elena Validus. The moment shattered as the Chrono Omnitrix flared with sudden, blinding intensity. Ben gasped, doubling over as golden energy engulfed his form. Ben. Elena reached for him, but her hand passed through his now translucent arm. Something's wrong, he managed, his voice distorting like a radio caught between stations. I can feel. His words cut off as reality seemed to fold around him. Elena's horrified face stretched and blurred, the rooftop dissolving into streaking lines of color and light. Ben felt himself falling, not physically, but through layers of existence itself. Then, abruptly, solid reality reasserted itself. He stumbled forward, disoriented, catching himself against a wall that hadn't been there moments before. The familiar skyline of Bellwood had vanished, replaced by a sprawling metropolis of crystalline towers and arching skyways. Temporal displacement complete, announced a synthetic voice from the Chrono Omnitrix. Timeline variant, K27. Chronological position. Relative future, approximately 217 standard years from origin point. Ben stared at the device in shock. You can talk now. Vocalization protocols activated during dimensional transition. The Omnitrix responded. Primary systems still calibrating to chronon saturation levels. Great, Ben muttered, forcing himself to focus on his surroundings. Rather than the disconcerting development of his usually silent device gaining conversational abilities. The city around him pulsed with life and technology far beyond contemporary Earth. Vehicles aped-like luminous teardrops hummed through the air in organized patterns. Citizens, human and clearly alien alike, moved along elevated walkways, many sporting technological enhancements that blurred the line between biology and machinery. Ben pressed himself into the shadows of what appeared to be a maintenance alcove, recognizing the need for caution. A future timeline could contain any number of variables. Perhaps the plumbers didn't exist here, or worse, perhaps he was known as someone or something entirely different. Omnitrix, can you get me back to my timeline? He asked quietly. Negative. Temporal translocation systems recharging. Estimated time to functionality, 37 standard hours. 37 hours. Ben hissed. I can't stay here that long. The timeline contamination alone could. Alert. The Omnitrix interrupted. Temporal enforcement agents approaching. Signature analysis indicates targeted pursuit parameters. Meaning they're looking for me specifically. Ben clarified. Already scanning for escape routes. Affirmative. Chronon disruption from translocation has triggered automated detection systems. Before Ben could formulate a plan, the air before him shimmered with distinctive energy patterns. 3 figures materialized directly in his path, humanoid but clearly not standard humans. Their bodies were partially biomechanical, with exoskeletons that seemed to merge seamlessly with their organic components. Each wore a distinctive emblem, a stylized hourglass bisected by a sword. The central figure stepped forward, removing a helmet to reveal a female face framed by silvery hair cut in a severe geometric style. Unlike the metallic components visible on her companions, her biomechanics appeared almost crystalline, reflecting light in subtle rainbow patterns. Benjamin Tennyson, she stated, voice resonating with an unusual harmonic quality. You were in violation of Temporal Accord Statutes 15 through 27. Unauthorized timeline transgression, c. Ronin disruption of a protected reality stream, and possession of unregistered Class 10 temporal technology. Ben raised his hand slowly, mind racing through possibilities. Fighting would likely cause more timeline damage. Running seemed futile against what were clearly specialized temporal agents. This displacement wasn't intentional, he explained carefully. I'm experiencing calibration issues with new technology. If you can help me return to my native timeline, I'll go willingly. The woman's eyes narrowed, revealing pupils ringed with the same crystalline quality as her exoskeletal components. Temporal incursions are never unintentional, Tennyson. The Chronometric Guild has documented 17 of your cross-timeline interferences in the past decade alone. That's impossible, Ben countered. I only acquired chronal capabilities 3 days ago. This statement caused visible confusion among the agents. The leader studied him more carefully, raising a device that projected a scanning field over his body. Chronological age discrepancy detected, she announced to her companions. Subject exhibits native temporal signature of origin era 21.43. Significantly predates established Tennyson incursion pattern. Meaning, one of the other agents questioned. He's from before. The woman's expression shifted subtly. This may be prime instance 0. The terms meant nothing to Ben. But the agent's demeanor changed instantly, tension replacing certainty, caution replacing aggression. Look, Ben tried again, I don't know what a prime instance 0 is, but I can tell you I'm experiencing involuntary temporal displacement due to this. He gestured toward the Chrono Omnitrix. If you know me, or some version of me, in this timeline, then you know I'm not trying to cause problems. The leader holstered her weapon, though her posture remained alert. I am Kyera Voss, Enforcement Prime of the Chronometric Guild. You claim no intentional violation. None, Ben confirmed. In my native timeline, I acquired this device 3 days ago. It's still calibrating to my biology. Kyera gestured to her companions, who maintained their positions while she approached Ben directly. Her movement was fluid but mechanical, precisely economical in a way that spoke of extensive enhancement. May I? She asked, indicating the Chrono Omnitrix. Ben hesitated, then extended his wrist. Just don't try to remove it. These things tend to have explosive objections to unauthorized tampering. A ghost of something that might have been amusement flickered across Kyera's features before disappearing behind professional detachment. She held a different scanner over the device, her expression growing increasingly troubled as data streamed across its holographic display. This is impossible, she murmured. The Chronon pattern is archaic, but paradoxically advanced. The quantum signature indicates. She looked up sharply. Where did you acquire this device? It evolved from my original Omnitrix after contact with a temporal entity in an alternate Chronian timeline, Ben explained, watching her reaction carefully. Something called the Chronovore was attacking their reality. The name triggered an immediate reaction. Kyera stiffened, her crystalline components flaring with internal light. She barked orders to her companions in a language Ben's Universal Translator couldn't process, perhaps a specialized temporal enforcement code. This changes parameters significantly, she said, returning her attention to Ben. If you've encountered the chronivore and survived, you require debriefing at Central Command, not field detention. I'd prefer just getting back to my timeline, Ben countered, growing increasingly uncomfortable with his situation. That isn't possible at present. Kyera's tone left no room for negotiation. Temporal translocation within protected sectors requires guild authorization and controlled gateway utilization. Your unshielded arrival has already created a Class 3 disruption wave. Meaning you've inadvertently altered approximately 17 minor probability threads simply by appearing here. She explained with practiced efficiency. Standard protocol requires containment and assessment before return authorization. Ben weighed his options. The Omnitrix needed 37 hours to recharge its temporal functions anyway. Fighting these agents would likely cause more damage and potentially draw more dangerous attention. Strategic cooperation seemed the wisest course. Fine, he conceded, but I want your assurance that you'll help me return once your protocols are satisfied. Kyera studied him with those unsettling crystalline eyes. The guild upholds timeline integrity above all else, Tennyson. If returning you to your native chronological position serves that purpose, it will be done. That wasn't exactly the reassurance I was looking for, Ben noted dryly. It's the only assurance available. She activated something on her wrist panel. Prepare for secured translocation. Quantum stasis fields will prevent further disruption during transport. Before Ben could respond, a translucent bubble of energy enveloped him. The city around them dissolved into streams of light as Kyera and her team, with Ben in containment, translocated from the scene. Elena Validus stared at the empty space where Ben had stood seconds earlier, her scientific mind already calculating possibilities while her emotions threatened to override analytical thought. The rooftop remained undisturbed save for a faint residual energy signature dissipating rapidly into the night air. Magister Tennyson, she called into her communicator, already moving toward the access door. Ben's gone. The Chrono Omnitrix activated and he just disappeared. Max Tennyson's voice replied immediately, tension evident despite his controlled tone. Any energy signatures we can track? Yes, but they're decaying rapidly. Elena punched the elevator call button with unnecessary force. I need quantum detection equipment in the main lab now. The Chronon particles have a unique signature we might be able to trace. On it, Max confirmed. Rook's bringing up the portable chronal scanner from Vault 3. The elevator seemed painfully slow as Elena descended to the laboratory level. Her mind racing through theoretical models of temporal displacement. If the Chrono Omnitrix had triggered a dimensional slip, Ben could be anywhere, anywhen, across infinite possible timelines. Rook met her at the lab entrance. The requested equipment already powered up in his capable hands. I have calibrated the scanner to the specific Chronon frequency the Omnitrix was emitting during our Chronian encounter, he reported. Falling into step beside her. Good thinking, Elena acknowledged, taking the device and adjusting its settings further. But we need something more precise if we're going to establish a lock across dimensional boundaries. She placed the scanner on her workbench and began connecting it to the lab's more powerful systems. As her fingers flew across the control panels, an unexpected wave of dizziness washed over her. Elena gripped the edge of the table, momentarily disoriented. Dr. Validus. Rook's concerned voice seemed distant. Are you unwell? The sensation passed as quickly as it had appeared, leaving Elena with a strange clarity. I'm fine, she assured him, straightening. Just stressed. But something had changed. As she returned to the scanner calibration, Elena became aware of a subtle perceptual shift. The quantum readouts on her screens no longer appeared as mere data points. She could somehow sense the patterns behind them, as though the relationship between particles had become intuitively obvious. This isn't right, she murmured, adjusting the scanner's parameters with newfound certainty. The temporal disruption had a secondary harmonic we missed. Rook observed her work with growing confusion. How can you determine that without comparative analysis? Elena couldn't explain the sudden intuitive understanding, so she deflected. Theoretical extrapolation. The Chronon decay pattern suggests a multiphasic displacement rather than linear temporal movement. Her fingers danced across the controls with uncharacteristic fluidity. inputting complex equations without conscious calculation. Within minutes, the scanner's display shifted, revealing a multi-dimensional map of energy signatures extending outward from the rooftop location. "There," she said, pointing to a specific vector. "That's the temporal trajectory. Ben didn't just move through time. He crossed into a parallel timeline approximately 217 years advanced from our present." Rook stared at her, then at the display. "That is remarkably precise, Drive. Validus. How did you calculate the exact temporal distance?" The question penetrated Elena's focused state, forcing her to confront the impossible knowledge she'd somehow accessed. She looked down at her hands, noticing with shock that the veins beneath her skin glimmered with microscopic golden traceries, barely visible but undeniably present. "The nanochips," she whispered, sudden understanding dawning. "They're still there. I thought your system was purged years ago," Rook said, alarmed. "Not entirely." Elena moved to a different console, activating a molecular scanner and directing it at herself. The procedure removed the macroscopic structures and deactivated the control mechanisms, but some components were too deeply integrated with my nervous system to safely extract. The scan confirmed her suspicion. Microscopic remnants of the nanochip technology remained embedded throughout her nervous system, primarily concentrated around her brain stem and spinal column. But they had changed, evolved into something that no longer matched their original programming. "They're responding to Chronon radiation," she realized aloud. "Ben's exposure must have affected me during our close proximity. The residual nanochips have reconfigured to process temporal energy." Rook studied the scan results with professional concern. "Is this transformation dangerous to you?" Elena considered the question with scientific detachment, pushing aside the personal implications. "I don't think so. The integration appears stable, and the chips aren't attempting to reproduce or control my actions. They've simply adapted to a new energy source. And this adaptation allows you to perceive temporal mathematics intuitively." "It seems that way." Elena returned to the Chronon scanner, her perception of the quantum relationships even clearer now. "I can see the connections between probability states, like reading a multi-dimensional map." Max entered the lab, his expression shifting from concern to confusion as he observed the complex temporal display Elena had generated. "What am I looking at?" "Ben's location," Elena answered confidently, "or at least, his temporal coordinates. He's in timeline variant K27, approximately 217 years in our relative future." "You determined this how?" Max asked, his tone suggesting he'd learned long ago not to discount unlikely explanations. Elena hesitated before answering truthfully. "The nanochip remnants in my system have evolved. They're processing Chronon energy now, giving me a perception of temporal mathematics I can't fully explain." To his credit, Max didn't question further. "Can you use this perception to help us retrieve him?" "Possibly." Elena studied the flowing data with her enhanced understanding. The displacement appears to have been triggered by the Omnitrix itself, not an external force. If that's true, it may be attempting to calibrate by exposing Ben to different temporal environments. "A diagnostic routine," Rook suggested. "More like an adaptation protocol," Elena clarified. "The Chrono Omnitrix is integrating with Ben's biology. These temporal jumps might be necessary for his system to adjust to its capabilities." Max frowned. "That doesn't solve our immediate problem. How do we get him back?" Lena's enhanced perception revealed patterns beyond conventional science, showing her possibilities that would have seemed like mysticism days earlier. "I think I might be able to establish a quantum tether. The nanochips in my system are attuned to the specific Chronon frequency of our timeline. If I can amplify that signal, you could create a beacon for Ben to follow back," Max finished, understanding immediately. "Exactly." Elena turned to Rook. "I need the quantum accelerator from storage room C and the phase discriminator we salvaged from that Chronosapian ship last year." As R.O.K. departed to gather the requested equipment, Max placed a hand on Elena's shoulder. "Are you sure this is safe for you? These nanochips nearly killed you once before." Elena met his concerned gaze steadily. "They're different now. I'm different. And right now, they're our best chance of bringing Ben home." Max studied her face, seeing the determination there. "He means a lot to you, doesn't he?" The question caught Elena off guard, its personal nature unexpected from the usually professional magister. She considered deflecting but found herself answering honestly. He never gave up on me when the nanochips took control, she said quietly. Even when I tried to kill him. Even when everyone else thought I was too far gone to save. Her eyes returned to the Chronon display, tracking the golden thread that represented Ben's temporal signature. I won't give up on him either. The Chronometric Guild headquarters defied conventional architectural understanding. Built within what appeared to be a suspended moment of temporal stasis, the massive crystalline structure existed partially outside normal spacetime. As Ben was led through its impossible geometries, corridors that stray tched longer inside than their external dimensions should allow, chambers where gravity oriented in multiple directions simultaneously, he found even his extensive experience with alien environments insufficient preparation. Your guild doesn't believe in user-friendly design, does it? He commented to Kyra, who walked beside him with mechanical precision. The structure exists across 17 temporal phases simultaneously. She explained without breaking stride. Your perception is limited to the intersection points accessible to three-dimensional consciousness. So there's more to this place that I can't even see. Correct. The guild operates throughout the temporal spectrum. Different divisions monitor different aspects of timeline stability. They passed through a security checkpoint where Ben's temporal signature was scanned again, this time more thoroughly. The process left him with a mild headache and the unsettling impression that the scanner had somehow indexed every moment of his existence. Temporal identity confirmed, announced the operator, a being whose species Ben didn't recognize. Subject carries prime timeline origin markers. Classification. Potential nexus individual. Kyra's posture subtly shifted at this designation, though her expression remained professionally neutral. Prepare consultation chamber 3 for temporal isolation. Full spectrum containment protocols. Is all that really necessary? Ben asked as they continued down a corridor lined with what appeared to be suspended temporal fragments, moments of history preserved like insects in amber. More than you realize, Kyra replied. Your designation as a potential nexus individual means your actions have disproportionate impact on timeline development. The chamber will prevent passive temporal contamination while we determine the appropriate response to your situation. They arrived at the designated room, a circular space whose walls shimmered with protective energy fields. Unlike the rest of the facility's crystal and metal aesthetic, this chamber appeared almost organic, with surfaces that responded to presence by subtly reshaping themselves. Wait here, Kyra instructed as the doorway sealed behind them. The temporal adjudicator will join us shortly. Ben took the opportunity to examine the Chrono Omnitrix more closely. The device had returned to its passive state, the golden patterns flowing more slowly across its surface. Any chance you could speed up that recharge time? He asked it quietly. Negative, the Omnitrix responded. Temporal RAN's location systems require full power cycling to prevent catastrophic dimensional fracturing. Worth a shot, Ben muttered, glancing up to find Kyra watching him with analytical intensity. Yo, you truly don't understand what you possess, do you? She asked, her tone shifting from professional detachment to something more complex. I understand enough to know it's dangerous, Ben replied carefully. That's why I need to get back to my timeline and consult with people who might help me control it properly. Kyra's crystalline eyes seemed to look through him rather than at him. In our history, the name Tennyson is associated with 17 major temporal crisis points. The original records indicate you were the first human to successfully navigate cross-timeline travel without guild technology. I haven't done that yet, Ben pointed out. At least not intentionally. From my perspective, I acquired these capabilities 3 days ago. And yet you've already encountered the Chronovore, she noted. An entity that most temporal specialists consider mythological. Trust me, it's very real, Ben assured her. And it's consuming entire timelines. That's why this version of the Omnitrix evolved, to help fight it. This information clearly disturbed Kyra, though she controlled her reaction with practiced discipline. Before she could respond, the chamber door dilated open to admit a new figure. The temporal adjudicator bore little resemblance to humanoid norms. Tall and willowy, their body appeared composed of layered temporal echoes, multiple versions of themselves occupying the same space simultaneously, creating a visual afterimage effect. When they spoke, Their voice resonated from multiple points in the timeline concurrently. Benjamin Tennyson, they intoned. The name carrying unusual weight in their multi-layered voice. Your presence creates complications. Ben had long since learned that respectful directness often worked best with authority figures of advanced species. I apologize for the disruption, adjudicator. My presence here was unintentional. The being's composite form shifted, temporal echoes realigning as they focused their attention. Intention is irrelevant to outcome, young Time Walker. Your arrival has already altered probability streams that the guild has spent centuries stabilizing. Time Walker. Ben questioned, the term striking a chord of familiarity. The chronivore called me that too. The adjudicator's reaction was subtle but unmistakable, the temporal echoes of their form momentarily desynchronizing before realigning. You have encountered the devourer directly. And survived. With help from the Chrono Omnitrix, Ben confirmed, extending his wrist to display the device. It transformed from my original Omnitrix after contact with an entity from a timeline the chronivore had already consumed. The adjudicator approached, their movement leaving subtle afterimages in reality itself. They examined the device without touching it, the temporal echoes of their form allowing them to observe the Omnitrix from multiple temporal angles simultaneously. Most concerning, they finally pronounced. This device contains chronon patterns consistent with prohibited timeline X73, a reality sequence that should not exist within accessible dimensional parameters. Meaning. Ben pressed, growing tired of cryptic temporal terminology. Meaning. Kyera interjected, that your Omnitrix contains energy from a timeline that was deliberately sealed off from the multiverse by the guild approximately 3,000 years ago. The adjudicator nodded, temporal echoes following the motion with millisecond delay. The specific civilization whose technology formed the basis of your device was deemed too dangerous to permit within the multiverse. Their manipulation of fundamental chronology threatened to unravel the entire dimensional fabric. You're talking about the Chronians, Ben realized. In my timeline, their civilization destroyed itself through temporal experimentation. In most timelines, yes, the adjudicator confirmed. But in timeline X73, they succeeded. Their mastery of Chronon manipulation allowed them to rewrite causality itself, a power no species should wield. So the guild intervened. Ben guessed. We isolated their timeline, preventing their technology from spreading across the multiverse. The adjudicator's many-layered voice carried no emotion, but their temporal echoes briefly aligned into a singular, more solid form, a sign of intensified focus. Yet somehow, our chronon patterns have integrated with your Omnitrix. Ben considered this information carefully. Could the chronivore be connected to timeline X73? Maybe that's why it's consuming other timelines, trying to break whatever seals you put in place. The question caused visible disturbance in the adjudicator's temporal alignment. They turned to Kyera. Enforcement Prime, initiate Temporal Containment Protocol 7. The Nexus individual must remain in isolation until full historical assessment can be completed. Wait, Ben protested. I need to get back to my timeline. If the chronivore is targeting multiple realities, my friends need to be warned. Your concern is noted, the adjudicator stated without genuine acknowledgement. However, your presence here presents a greater immediate threat to timeline stability. You will remain under guild supervision until we determine appropriate action. The finality in their tone made it clear that discussion was over. With a fluid gestu, that left reality rippling in their wake, the adjudicator departed the chamber, leaving Ben alone with Kyera. So much for cooperation, Ben muttered, reassessing his strategic options. Kyera's expression remained professionally neutral, but something in her posture had changed. Protocol 7 is extreme, she noted quietly. It typically involves indefinite temporal stasis. That's not acceptable, Ben replied firmly. I understand your concerns about timeline contamination, but there's a bigger threat out there. The chronivore isn't just consuming histories, it's erasing entire possibility streams from existence. Such claims require verification, she stated, though her tone lacked conviction. And how long will that verification take? Ben challenged. Days, years. Meanwhile, how many more timelines disappear? Including, potentially, yours. Kyera's crystalline eyes studied him with unnerving intensity. Guild protocols exist for good reason, Tennyson. Temporal int. Interference has caused catastrophic damage throughout history. I'm not denying that, Ben countered. But sometimes protocols need to adapt to new threats. If your guild has existed for thousands of years protecting the timelines, shouldn't the systematic destruction of those timelines be your highest priority? The argument visibly resonated with Kyra, her biomechanical components pulsing with subtle light as she processed his words. Before she could respond, an alarm blared throughout the facility, a piercing, multi-tone sound that seemed to vibrate through multiple temporal frequencies simultaneously. What's happening? Ben asked, instantly alert. Kyra accessed a control panel on her wrist, her expression darkening as information scrolled across the holographic display. Temporal breach in progress. Containment level 7. She looked up sharply. Something is attempting to penetrate the guild's outer defensive perimeter. The Chrono Omnitrix flared suddenly to life on Ben's wrist, golden energy pulsing with increasing urgency. Warning, it announced. Chronovore temporal signature detected. Estimated arrival, 3 minutes 17 seconds. Kyra's professional composure cracked slightly. Impossible. The guild headquarters exists in secured temporal stasis. No entity should be able to locate it, let alone breach its defenses. Unless it followed me, Ben realized with dawning horror. The Chronovore said it would find me again. What if it can track the Chrono Omnitrix across timelines? The implication hung between them for a charged moment before Kyra made a decision. She accessed her wrist controls again, overriding the chamber's security protocols. What are you doing? Ben asked. Testing your theory about protocols adapting to new threats, she replied tersely. If the Chronovore truly is targeting you specifically, keeping you here endangers the entire guild infrastructure and every timeline we protect. The chamber door dilated open. Kyra gestured for Ben to follow. We need to get you to a temporal projection chamber. If we can accelerate your device's recharging cycle, we might be able to send you back to your timeline before the entity breaks through our outer defenses. Won't you be violating your adjudicator's orders? Ben asked, even as he moved quickly to follow her lead. Technically, I'm implementing an alternative containment strategy, she replied with surprising dryness. Moving the target away from critical temporal infrastructure. They hurried through corridors now filled with guild personnel responding to the emergency. The facility's structure itself seemed to be reacting to the threat, passageways reconfiguring to create defensive chokepoints, walls thickening with additional layers of temporal shielding. The projection chamber is 3 levels down, Kyra explained as they entered what appeared to be a gravity well, a vertical shaft where controlled gravitational fields allowed rapid descent between floors. It contains amplifiers designed to boost temporal translocation signals. Will that be enough to recharge the Omnitrix? Ben asked as they dropped smoothly through the shaft. Unknown, she admitted, but it represents your best chance of leaving before. A violent tremor interrupted her, the entire facility shuddering as though struck by some immense force. The gravity field fluctuated wildly, sending them tumbling through the shaft. Ben managed to catch Kyra's arm, using his body to shield her as they crashed onto a lower platform. Status report. She RKED into her communicator as they regained their footing. Outer temporal barrier breached, came the urgent response. Entity has penetrated to containment ring 3. Defensive measures proving ineffective. Estimated central breach in 7 minutes. Kyra's expression hardened with resolve. Continue evacuation protocols. Priority protection for the timeline archive. She turned to Ben, earlier suspicion replaced by grim acceptance. Your theory appears correct. This entity is pursuing you specifically and demonstrating capabilities beyond our defensive parameters. Another impact shook the facility. More violent than the first. Structural supports groaned as the temporal stasis field maintaining the guild's dimensional position faltered momentarily. We need to keep moving, Kyra urged, leading Ben toward an emergency access corridor. The projection chamber is our only option now. As they navigated the increasingly unstable facility, Ben noticed the Chrono Omnitrix's behavior changing. The flowing patterns across its surface had accelerated, and the device emitted a high-pitched tone at the edge of audibility. It's responding to the Chronovore's proximity, he realized aloud. Like it's preparing for confrontation. Can you use it to fight the entity? Kyra asked pragmatically. I did once before, but it drained almost all the device's power, Ben explained. And I'm still learning how to control its capabilities. They reached a reinforced doorway marked with symbols Ben couldn't read. Kyra placed her hand against a recognition panel, causing the massive door to slide open with surprising speed. The temporal projection chamber beyond was unlike anything in Ben's considerable experience with advanced technology. The circular space contained no visible machinery. Yet the very air seemed charged with potential energy. The floor featured a complex array of interlocking circles inscribed with mathematical equations that shifted and recalculated continuously. Stand in the central circle, Kyra instructed, moving to a control interface that appeared to be composed of pure light. The system will attempt to synchronize with your device's temporal signature and accelerate its recharging process. Ben positioned himself as directed, feeling an immediate response from the Chrono Omnitrix. The device's golden patterns brightened, and the circular array beneath his feet began to glow in matching patterns. It's working, he observed as energy flowed between the chamber's systems and the Omnitrix. I can feel the power levels increasing. Kyra monitored the process with professional focus, though the facility's continuing tremors made her task increasingly difficult. The entity has breached Containment Ring 4, she reported grimly. We have perhaps 5 minutes before it reaches this section. The Omnitrix says it needs at least 3 minutes to achieve minimum translocation capability, Ben replied, watching the device's readouts with growing concern. It's going to be close. Another violent impact rocked the chamber, causing several power conduits to rupture in cascades of golden energy. Kyra was thrown from the control interface, landing hard against the far wall. Kyra. Ben moved instinctively to help her, but she gestured sharply for him to remain in place. Stay in the focal point, she ordered, pulling herself back to her feet despite a visible crack in her crystalline exoskeletal components. Interrupting the synchronization process could cause catastrophic temporal feedback. She returned to the damaged controls, her movements betraying injury though her face remained composed. The system is failing. Power distribution has become unstable. What does that mean for the recharge? Ben asked urgently. It means we need to channel the remaining energy in a single pulse rather than the graduated process I'd planned. Her hands moved across the interface with precise urgency. It will be less controlled. Meaning I can send you back toward your timeline, but without precise targeting. Kyra met his eyes directly. You may not arrive exactly when or where you departed. The temporal drift could be significant. Ben weighed the alternatives quickly. Remaining meant facing the chronivore in a crumbling facility with an incompletely charged device. Leaving meant uncertainty, but also the chance to warn his timeline about the coming threat. Do it, he decided. Better an imprecise return than no return at all. Kyra nodded once, acknowledging the choice. As she reconfigured the chamber's systems for the emergency procedure, a new alarm sounded, this one deeper and more ominous than those before. Central breach imminent, announced the facility's automated system. Temporal core stability compromised. Initiate immediate evacuation of all personnel. We're out of time, Kyra stated, fingers flying across the controls. Preparing emergency translocation pulse. The chamber's energy focused inward, converging on Ben's position with increasing intensity. The Chrono Omnitrix responded, its surface now blindingly bright as it absorbed the concentrated temporal power. A final, devastating impact shook the entire facility. Walls cracked as reality itself seemed to warp around them. Through a fissure that opened in the chamber's outer wall, Ben caught a glimpse of what pursued him, a vast darkness that consumed light, time, and possibility itself. The chronivore had found him again, just as it had promised. Now, Kyra shouted, slamming her hand down on what must have been an activation control. The chamber's accumulated energy discharged in a single, overwhelming pulse. Ben felt the power surge through the Chrono Omnitrix and into his very being. Reality fractured around him as translocation began. In the last moment before dimensional shift completed, he saw the chamber wall collapse entirely. The Chronovore's presence poured through the breach like living shadow, tendrils of anti-time reaching toward him with hungry purpose. More disturbing still, he witnessed Kyra standing her ground between him and the entity. Drawing a weapon that glowed with temporal energy, a final defensive gesture even as the translocation field enveloped him completely. Then everything dissolved into golden light and The sickening sensation of being pulled through the fabric of reality itself. Ben tumbled through dimensional layers, caught in currents of possibility too complex for human comprehension. Images Florida's head through his consciousness, fragments of timelines, moments of what might have been or might yet be, faces familiar and unknown. The journey seemed eternal and instantaneous simultaneously. Then, with jarring suddenness, solid reality reasserted itself around him. Ben crashed onto hard ground, the impact driving the breath from his lungs. For several moments, he could only lie still, waiting for his senses to reorient after the traumatic dimensional transition. Gradually, awareness returned. He was outdoors, lying on what felt like concrete. Night sky stretched above him, stars familiar enough to suggest Earth. The air carried the distinctive scent of his home planet, though with urban undertones he recognized from long experience. Temporal displacement complete, the Chrono Omnitrix announced. Its voice noticeably weaker than before. Timeline variant. Prime. Chronological position. Indeterminate. Warning. Significant power depletion. Emergency conservation mode activated. At least we're in the right timeline. Ben muttered, pushing himself to a sitting position with effort. His surroundings came into clearer focus. He had materialized on the roof of what appeared to be an apartment building. The city skyline around him was recognizable as Bellwood, though with subtle differences that suggested he hadn't returned to precisely the same time he'd left. Careful explore it. Ion of the rooftop revealed an access door leading to interior stairs. Ben descended cautiously, unsure what version of his present he might have returned to. The building seemed ordinary enough, a residential structure with numbered apartments lining quiet hallways. A discarded newspaper in the stairwell provided his first temporal clue. The date indicated he'd arrived approximately 6 months after his departure from the plumber headquarters rooftop. Not ideal, but certainly better than the centuries of displacement he'd experienced in the other direction. Reaching the building's lobby, Ben found a public communications terminal. With the Omnitrix in conservation mode and his plumber badge lost somewhere between timelines, conventional contact methods were his only option. He dialed the emergency code for plumber headquarters from memory. Plumber Central Command, came the professional response after several verification protocols were satisfied. State your identity and situation. This is Ben Tennyson, he replied. Relief washing through him at the familiar procedural response. Authorization code Green Alpha 710. I need immediate extraction and contact with Magister Tennyson or Drive. Elena Validus. A stunned silence followed his identification before the operator responded with noticeably less professional composure. Ben Tennyson. Is this really you? The reaction confirmed his suspicion that his absence had been significant. Yes, it's really me. I've been temporally displaced for the past 6 months from my perspective, but I've returned to the prime timeline. Sir, please maintain your position, the operator instructed, voice tightly controlled now. A response team is being dispatched to your location immediately. Estimated arrival time 3 minutes. Thank you, Ben replied, ending the communication. While waiting, he took the opportunity to examine the Chrono Omnitrix more closely. The device appeared dormant, its usually V-brand surface dull and the flowing patterns barely visible. Whatever emergency conservation mode entailed, it had clearly shut down all non-essential functions to preserve core integrity. True to the operator's word, barely 3 minutes passed before the distinctive hum of plumber technology announced the arrival of a response team. The building's front doors slid open to admit 4 officers in standard gear. Led by a figure Ben recognized immediately. Rook, he called out, genuine pleasure at seeing his partner overwhelming protocol momentarily. Rook Blanco stared at Ben with an expression on that cycled rapidly through disbelief, shock, and cautious hope. Ben, he questioned, approaching slowly as though expecting a hologram or imposter. Is it truly you? In the slightly temporally displaced flesh. Ben confirmed with a weary smile. Sorry about the dramatic entrance. Turns out timeline hopping isn't an exact science. Rook's professional reserve cracked as he stepped forward and embraced Ben firmly, an uncharacteristic display of emotion that spoke volumes about the past 6 months from the Ravanagonder's perspective. We believed you lost, Rook said simply as he stepped back. Composure quickly returning though his eyes remained suspiciously bright. Elena Validus has been working without cessation to establish a temporal beacon, but after the 4th month, statistical probability suggested that I wasn't coming back. Ben finished for him. I'm sorry. The displacement wasn't voluntary, and getting back was complicated. You can explain everything at headquarters, Rook replied, gesturing toward the waiting transport. There are many people who will be most relieved by your return. The journey to Plumber headquarters passed in a blur of explanations and questions. Ben provided a condensed version of his experiences: the involuntary displacement, the encounter with the Chronometric Guild, and the Chronovore's pursuit. Rook listened with professional attention, though Ben could sense the deeper emotional reaction beneath his partner's controlled exterior. Headquarters itself seemed to explode with activity upon news of his arrival. Person L appeared in corridors to verify the rumors of his return with their own eyes. Ben acknowledged their reactions with tired waves and brief smiles, focused primarily on reaching the command center where his grandfather would most likely be coordinating operations. The doors to the main operations room slid open to reveal a scene of controlled chaos. Max Tennyson stood at the central console, giving rapid instructions to various teams while monitoring multiple situation displays. He turned at the sound of the doors, his expression freezing as he caught sight of his grandson. Ben, he said simply, voice thick with emotion despite his professional surroundings. Hey Grandpa, Ben replied, suddenly feeling the weight of the past 6 months, both his chaotic journey and his family's uncertainty. Sorry I'm late. Max crossed the room in quick strides, protocol forgotten as he pulled Ben into a fierce embrace. For a moment, the legendary Magister was simply a grandfather reunited with family he'd feared lost forever. Welcome home, Max said gruffly as he released Ben, quickly composing himself though his eyes revealed the depth of his relief. You've caused quite a stir, disappearing like that. Believe me, it wasn't in the plan, Ben assured him. Is Elena here? Rook said she's been working on a way to bring me back. A complex emotion crossed Max's features. She's in the quantum lab. Hasn't left it for more than a few hours at a time since you disappeared. He activated his communicator. Elena, I need you in the command center immediately. Not now, Max, came the distracted response. The voice unmistakably Elena's though tinged with exhaustion. I'm recalibrating the temporal beacon again. The Chronon signature is showing promising fluctuations in the 9th harmonic. Elena, Max repeated more firmly. Trust me, you want to be here for this. A sigh of frustration carried clearly through the communication link. Fine. 5 minutes. Ben used those minutes to provide Max and the other senior plumbers with a more detailed account of his experiences, emphasizing the Chronovore's threat and the transformed nature of the Omnitrix. As he spoke, he nodded. The command center gradually clearing of non-essential personnel, a subtle but deliberate effort to provide privacy for what would likely be an emotional reunion. The doors slid open again, admitting a visibly irritated Elena Validus. Her appearance showed the strain of months of intense work, hair pulled back in a hasty ponytail, dark circles beneath her eyes, clothing rumpled from extended wear. She carried a tablet filled with complex equations, attention still fixed on the screen as she entered. This had better be important, Max, she began without looking up. The temporal alignment sequence is at a critical. She stopped abruptly as she finally raised her eyes from the tablet. For a moment, she simply stared at Ben, all color draining from her face. Hi, Ben said inadequately, suddenly uncertain how to bridge the gap of 6 months separation. The tablet slipped from Elena's fingers, clattering unnoticed to the floor as she took one hesitant step forward, then another. You're back, she whispered. Voice barely audible. You're actually back. Seems like the Chrono Omnitrix had other ideas about when exactly I should return, Ben explained, watching her carefully. Better late than never. Something shifted in Elena's expression, relief giving way to 6 months of accumulated fear, frustration, and determination. She closed the remaining distance between them in quick strides. Ben prepared himself for an embrace similar to those he'd received from Rook and Max. Instead, Elena's hand connected firmly with his cheek in a slap that echoed through the command center. 6 months, Tennyson, she stated, voice trembling with emotion. 6 months of recalibrating quantum equations, realigning temporal matrices, and fighting anyone who suggested we should stop looking for you. Ben rubbed his cheek, accepting the rebuke without complaint. I tried to get back sooner. There were complications. Complications, she repeated, the single word carrying months of emotional turmoil. Then, with the same intensity, she stepped forward and kissed him. The action caught Ben completely by surprise, more shocking than the slap that preceded it. For a breathless moment, past and present seemed to merge, the complexity of their long history crystallizing into a single point of connection. When Elena pulled away, her expression revealed equal surprise at her own action. The few remaining personnel in the command center suddenly found urgent reasons to examine distant monitors or consoles. That was, Ben began, uncertain how to complete the thought. 6 months of waiting. Elena finished for him, composure returning rapidly though a flush remained on her cheeks. Don't read too much into it. But her eyes told a different story, one Ben wasn't quite ready to interpret after the dimensional chaos he'd just experienced. He settled for a slight smile and a nod of understanding. The nanochips, he said instead, noticing the more prominent golden tracery visible beneath her skin. They've evolved further. Elena accepted the change of subject with evident relief. Yes, the Chronon exposure accelerated their integration with my nervous system. They've been essential to the tracking efforts. I can perceive temporal mathematics directly now. That's how you built the beacon, Ben realized. I knew you were still out there somewhere, she confirmed. Her scientific detachment returning as she retrieved her fallen tablet. The quantum tether I gave you before you disappeared maintained a faint connection. It wasn't strong enough to pull you back, but it confirmed your continued existence within the multiverse. Max interrupted gently, reminding them of the larger situation. Ben, you mentioned this Chronovore entity pursued you through the guild facility. If it can track you across timelines, we need to prepare for the possibility it might find you here as well. The sobering reminder shifted the mood immediately. Ben looked down at the dormant Chrono Omnitrix. It's in some kind of recovery mode right now. I'm not sure how long before it's functional again. Then we work with what we have, Elena stated with renewed focus. I'll need to analyze the device's current state and determine the optimal approach for accelerating its recovery. First, Max interjected firmly, you both need rest. Ben's been through dimensional transit, and you, Elena, haven't slept properly in weeks. The world has managed without Ben Tennyson for 6 months, it can handle a few more hours while you recover. Ben wanted to argue but he found his grandfather's assessment accurate. Exhaustion weighted his limbs, and the aftereffects of multiple temporal displacements left his thoughts slightly disjointed. Even Elena, despite her IOUS eagerness to begin working with the Chrono Omnitrix, swayed slightly on her feet. Fine, she conceded reluctantly. Minimal rest period, then straight to analysis. The chronovore threat won't wait for our convenience. Agreed, Max replied with the satisfaction of a small victory. Rook, please escort them both to the residential quarters. Full security protocols remain in effect. As they left the command center, Ben found himself walking beside Elena, their shoulders occasionally brushing in the corridor. Neither mentioned the kiss, though its implications hung unspoken between them. So, Ben finally ventured as they approached the residential section. 6 months of temporal equations, huh? Elena glanced at him sidelong, exhaustion temporarily giving way to a hint of her usual sharp humor. Someone had to save your chronologically challenged backside, Tennyson. Well, he replied with genuine gratitude, I'm glad it was you. Their eyes met briefly, an unspoken understanding passing between them. Whatever complications the future might hold, temporal or emotional, they would face them together. Rook escorted them to adjacent quarters, his professional demeanor RMLY back in place though his relief at Ben's return remained evident. Rest well, he instructed formally. I will be stationed outside should you require anything. As the doors closed behind them, Ben and Elena retreated to their separate rooms. Ben sank onto the standard issue bed, too tired even to remove his jacket. The familiar surroundings of plumber quarters provided a comforting contrast to the dimensional chaos he'd experienced. Just as consciousness began to fade, the Chrono Omnitrix flared suddenly to life on his wrist. Its surface brightened momentarily as a holographic display activated, projecting a star chart Ben didn't recognize. Scattered across the projection, small points of light winked out one by one, timeline signatures disappearing from existence. Warning, the device announced. Its voice stronger than it had been since his return. Chronovore activity detected in adjacent probability sectors. Multiple timeline erasures in progress. Ben stared at the disappearing points of light, each representing billions of lives and possibilities being consumed by the entity he'd now encountered twice. The brief rest Max had insisted on suddenly seemed like an unaffordable luxury. With renewed urgency, he activated the communication panel beside his bed. "Elena," he called, knowing she would likely still be awake despite her exhaustion. "We have a problem." Her reply came immediately, confirming his assumption. "I see it too. The nanochips just went haywire. I can feel the timeline collapses." "Meet me in the lab in 5 minutes," Ben instructed. "The chronovore isn't waiting, so neither can we." Quote. As he ended the communication, Ben studied the holographic display again. The pattern of timeline erasures wasn't random, they formed a clear progression moving steadily closer to the prime timeline's position. The chronovore was methodically eliminating adjacent possibility branches, working its way toward the core reality from which all others diverged. Toward his home. Toward everyone he had ever known or cared about. The weariness of dimensional travel gave way to resolute determination. Ben Tennyson had defended Earth and the wider universe from countless threats over the years. Now the battleground had expanded to include the entire multiverse of possibility, and the stakes had never been higher. Whatever it took, whatever price he personally might pay, he would find a way to stop the chronovore before it consumed everything that mattered. The Chrono Omnitrix had chosen him for this fight, evolving specifically to counter this threat. Now he needed to master its power before time itself ran out. Chapter 2 End. The End. I hope you enjoyed this episode. Remember to subscribe and like this video. See you in the next video.